So chapter 6, 3 verses, 3 little Mishnahs. It starts off as follows. Okay, so we don't know with those 2 ways, we can move on. See that no one leads you astray from this way of teaching, because he does not teach you according to God. If you can bear the whole yoke of the Lord, you will be complete. Can any of you guys bear the whole yoke of the Lord? But if you cannot, then do what you can. How comforting isn't that? That's like a mother's words to you, when it comes to all the stress of, I have to be absolutely perfect. Do what you can. Concerning food, bear what you can. It doesn't say bear is kosher. Understand that properly. Concerning food, bear what you can, but scrupulously guard yourself from what has been offered to idols, because it is the worship of dead gods. Okay, nice little chapter. It's the shortest chapter of the Didache. It serves as a bridge and a segue from a 2-way section to the ritual and community instructions that make up the rest of the Didache. The clear change in the Didache's grammar is seen beginning in this chapter as well. The switch seems to indicate a shift in focus from the individualized instruction to more community-orientated teaching, which we find in the remaining chapters. And it's all based upon Acts chapter 15. There's some correlation that can be established between Didache chapter 6 and Acts chapter 15, as if the author of the Didache had the ruling of the apostolic decree in mind and intentionally attempted to elucidate it in chapter 6. Remember, we're saying that the Didache might have been written even before the book of Acts. So what he would have had was that apostolic decree. So the reason why it's called an apostolic decree is because it was actually decreed on a piece of paper, and they sent it out from Jerusalem to all the Messianic communities out there, so that they all know this is the ruling from the apostles. So this was actually like stuck up on the doors back in those days at the communities, saying, here's the ruling from the apostles, this is what we have to do for Gentiles. So they must have had that in mind when they wrote chapter 6 over here. Notice the following similarities in the content. In Acts 15 it says, we have heard that some persons have gone out from us and troubled you with words, unsettling your minds, although we gave them no instructions. Didache says, see that no one leads you astray from this way of teaching, because he does not teach you according to God. So there were these fake apostles that used to run around and claim to be apostles and say, the apostle sent us here to tell you so and so and so, and give me some money and your life will be much better. Those guys existed back then as well. Acts chapter 15 verse 10 says, now therefore, why are you putting God to the test by placing a yoke on the neck of the disciples that neither our fathers nor we have been able to bear? What does Didache say? If you can bear the whole yoke of the Lord, you'll be complete. But if you cannot, then do what you can. You see the exact similarities here. And then 15 verse 28 obviously says, for it had seemed good to the Holy Spirit and to us to lay on you no greater burden than these requirements, that you abstain from what has been offered to idols, and those 4 prohibitions. And the Didache says, concerning food, bear what you can, but scrupulously guard yourself from things that have been offered to idols, because it is the worship of dead gods. So it's actually pretty cool to see that correlation between the two. Furthermore, the entire instruction of the Didache is a natural outworking of the ruling of the Jerusalem Council in Acts chapter 15. So the whole thing of Torah for Gentiles is what's being discussed here. Acts 15 says, therefore my judgment is that we should not trouble those of the Gentiles who turn to God, but should write them to abstain from things polluted by idols, sexual immorality, and from what has been strangled, and from blood. Those are the 4. However, these prohibitions were not to be considered the upper limit of Torah observance for a Gentile. Paul and the rest of the apostles laid out many other commandments and instructions for the Gentiles throughout the New Testament. We've got a whole book on it here in the bookshop called God-Fearers. You can work through that as well. Right, the Didache seems to encourage Gentile believers to move beyond just the 7 Noahide laws and the 4 apostolic decrees, and to embrace as much of the Torah's lifestyle as they are able. If you're able to take everything, the entire yoke, good for you. That's what they say. So they're not saying you stick here and just be happy with these 7, right? Keep the 7, go to heaven. They were saying, do as much as you can, do more than that. Okay? It encourages its audience to move towards embracing the whole yoke of the Lord, but then graciously concedes that if they aren't able, they should do whatever they can. And people, whenever we mention this, in our congregation at least, very often we find people who go, what, you say the Torah is not for Gentiles? And there's this whole fight about it, and there's this whole head bashing about it. No, that's not what we're saying. I don't know how it happens. It's the weirdest thing. The words that come out of my mouth somehow don't enter the same way into their ears. There's some... Those filters again. They must clean their filters. They must eat more gefiltered fish. I think that's the secret. It's the weirdest thing. And then there's this whole argument, what? I feel like a second-class citizen. It happens over and over again. We never say that. We do say the Torah is for Gentiles. In fact, the Didache says, do as much as you can. Okay. Dietary restrictions. Here we go. As if your diet wasn't difficult enough. 3 of the 4 prohibitions of the Jerusalem Council are dietary in nature. So it's not surprising that chapter 6 of the Didache addresses the dietary laws. The first prohibition, eating food contaminated by idols, is the only one from Acts 15, also mentioned directly in the Didache. The remaining 2 dietary prohibitions of the Apostolic Decree, which is avoiding strangled meat and blood, are not mentioned in the Didache, well, at least the version that we've got, but they are mentioned in the Apostolic Constitutions, the commentary on the Didache, and in the Ethiopic version of the Didache. So there it does have them as well. So that's kind of strange. Don't ask me why, but that's the way it is. Here's what it says in the Ethiopic church order. It says, keep yourself from the religion of demons and from gods and from dead things keep, and from blood and from things strangled, and further, a bone shall not be broken. Or we find in the Apostolic Constitution version of the Didache, this is what it says. Concerning food, the Lord says to you, you shall eat the good things of the earth, and of all sorts of flesh you shall eat as the green herb, but you shall pour out the blood, you shall not eat the blood. Apostolic Constitutions. These passages prove that despite the omission of this prohibition in the Didache, the communities that continued in the Didache's instructions adhered to the prohibition against consuming blood and things strangled. It is highly unlikely that a 4th century church document such as the Apostolic Constitutions would have created such a thoroughly Jewish prohibition in its reworking of the Didache, let alone cited a proof text from the Torah to support its observance. Evidence rather points to the fact that the original version of the Didache most likely included both the Apostolic Decree's prohibitions of blood and of things strangled. It may have been subsequently removed by a later Christian copyist who might have viewed the commandment to eat only kosher slaughtered meat as too cumbersome in non-Jewish contexts or no longer applicable to him. Who knows? Very possible. Okay, so let's get into the commentary of these 3 verses. Of these 3 verses. Right, it says, see that no one leads you astray from this way of teaching, because he does not teach you according to God. Now, all that has been taught so far is to be carefully guarded, and the new Gentile disciples are to watch out for those who would lead them astray from the way of life. This is the way that the Apostolic Constitution tells it. It actually cites a proof text from Deuteronomy chapter 5. It says, see that no one leads you astray from piety, for he says, you may not turn aside from it to the right or to the left, and you may have that you may have understanding in all that you do. That's Deuteronomy chapter 5 verse 32. For if you do not turn out of the right way, you will not be ungodly. Okay, famous one, right? Draper sees in Didache chapter 6 2 distinct groups that could have threatened to lead members of the Didache communities astray from this way of teaching. On the one hand, he observes, Christians depicted as sheep turned to wolves, led astray by the Antichrist, who wished to lead the community away from its traditional way of teaching, which breaks down the Torah. So that's one group that he sees. And on the opposite side, he sees other Jews labeled as hypocrites. So those are the 2 threats that these early believers, these early converts to our community were facing. The community must seek to preserve the Torah and the traditions as handed down by the apostles, and must not fall prey to those who said that it had been done away with, or who sought to impose their own interpretations on variant halakha. It's not just us who had to struggle with the Christianity saying the Torah was done away with. Even the very first community of believers had to watch out for that exact same thing. For example, it says, forsaking the right way. This is 2 Peter chapter 2, he talks about this group of people. He says, forsaking the right way, they have gone astray. It was evident in that day and age already. That same warning, of course, applies today. The whole law is done away with thing. I think most of us have moved past that now. We know now how to understand that and how to argue with that. But the other version is a bit difficult. The other version is, what did he say? Other Jews labeled as hypocrites. Hypocritical legalists. This is a thing that we have got a danger of sneaking into us, that we become so legalistic, we become hypocritically legalistic, that you have to do this. And this is the thing that's happening a lot more in Messianic Judaism. I think the Hebrew roots movement struggles with the people that keep telling them in the church that law's done away with. In Messianic Judaism, we've got the danger of people trying to convert, trying to be more legalistic. I think this is happening a lot. I've seen a lot of this happen where people think they have to become Jewish in order to be saved. And they do all of the traditions just because it looks more Jewish. That's not a reason to do these traditions. Right? We practice Messianic Judaism as you are. We've got to find that balance between the two. Come as you are, Paul says, right?
I was just thinking, when it comes to what's the difference between Messianic Judaism and other Christians, right? Mainly revolves, and everything else is derived from it, the interpretation of when the new covenant starts. If you believe that the new covenant has started already, and this is the kingdom of God, so to speak, right? Then of course you will think that the law has been done away with, right? It's the Torah of Mashiach right now. And consequently, one's view of Jewish people, the Old Testament and so on will follow from that, right? And when the Didache talks about, take on the full yoke of the Lord, if you're able. If you're not able, then do as much as you can. When we look at the commandments of God, right? Obviously, for most people, the commandments to do with priests and so on like this doesn't apply, right? So they would be looking at it from the point of view of which are these commandments that would apply to the Gentiles, right? If you're able to take up all of those, you're doing well, right? If you're not able to do all of those because you're not born with all of this knowledge, right? And you have to change your attitudes and things like that, then do as much as you can. That's a general principle, right?
Yeah.
And I think yesterday I was having a chat with someone that distressed me a lot. But,
Stop talking to the mirror, hey?
Apart from that, Chris.
That's what bothers you as well.
Also bothers me. Right? There's this theory of multiple intelligences. And most people take intelligence as just your IQ, your ability to understand. Like you said, you say something, people understand something else. Right? It's not what you said, right? And in the same way, they talk about emotional intelligence and so on like this. Now, what do you do when a person doesn't have emotional intelligence, right? They don't understand how other people perceive them. They don't perceive things correctly. Maybe they're extremely selfish and they only want to know, are you saying something about me? No, I was talking about a donkey.
Yeah.
But it's about me,
Yeah.
right? What are you saying, And so at the end I said to the person, why do you go to a home group? Why? They say, like for emotional support, like for comfort, also for, like some teaching, some word of God and so on like this. So in this case, he went and he said something there where he was exposing himself, and he wanted some empathy and some sympathy, and people just humiliated him and mocked him and, all this kind of stuff, right? So he is asking me, what should I do? Should I stay or should I leave? And I said, you don't tell me what it is that you have done and what is the issue. And it's very difficult for me to determine what you should do.
Yeah, because maybe what he perceives is just mockery, and them just being little... Trying to just make light of the situation on his
We do with John on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I went into a story about, some kids, and if you have kids, you're always worried about what will happen to them in society with other kids, right? So if they're overly sensitive, sometimes out of love, you want to tease them a little bit, you want to make them a little bit more relaxed, right? If that doesn't work, right, they come back really,
broken.
Then you say, this is not going to work. Now I'd rather try and deal with everybody else and tell them to walk on eggshells so that this one is protected. Because you see, this thing didn't work, right? Somewhere in between, you can interpret things differently. And I think this is one of the big issues that, when you're dealing with teaching the Gentiles. You come from a different perspective. Certain things might sound very harsh. They might not even understand the banter that is going on for the sake of heaven. They might not understand it. So how do you get people up to a level where they recognize this thing? Firstly, they have to be alive. They have to remain, right? Because at the first sight of trouble, whatever you interpret as trouble, if you flee, then you're never ever going to be grounded. So then I was told that, no, I mean, and these are like leaders. It's just like thinking, how long have you been a Christian? These people are probably much younger in the faith. They're considered to be leaders, right? You don't really want to give anything. You just want to take. And that's very exhausting. And so most people will then try and, like panel beat you into some kind of shape. And then you'll run away from there to the next place. And you'll never really grow. But the thing is, I can't say that. I can't say that because there's no point.
There's no point. It won't register.
So I think a lot of these teachings has pretty much the same kind of like context. I mean, how do you grow people?
Yeah. Makes me think of...
They have to grow if they want to grow as well.
Yeah.
And that increase is only given by God.
Yeah,
we have to do the planting, we have to do the watering, because that's enough. That's what's instructed to us. But what comes from that, out of our hands.
If you want them to grow, give them manure.
What if they're full of manure?
You know, two things happen.
Manure.
Either kids are raised from a young age to be messianic or proper God-fearers, or something just implodes in their life and then they go look for answers. That's the two things I've seen in this.
Yeah, in this day and age. I'm thinking about these guys. I mean, how on earth did they get these pagans to come and join the faith? The work that the Holy Spirit did in this first century is, I don't think we appreciate it. It's clearly a work from God.
It's really such a difficult thing to approach another faith.
Yeshua had been walking the earth recently. And
That was
also fresh news kind of.
Yeah, I think we have different tactics today. It makes me think of that thing that Paul says to the Greeks, I'm a Greek, to the Jew, I'm a Jew. You have to adapt to that person to try and let them see through reach them through their point of view, which is difficult. I mean, if you're trying to communicate something that's based on Hebraic thinking and Semitic thinking, you go there to someone who's Greek thinking.
Where do you draw the line?
That's a difficult question.
Sorry, where I've got, where I know a couple of people like of this new Generation Z kind of believing, gender is this abstract thing that you can just choose what you want. And then how do you, because it gets, where do you draw the line? Okay, I'm not going to continue walking this person. Where do you still say, no, I'll continue trying to sow into this person's life?
I don't think you do draw the line. I think you continue.
You know what
people are going to get more and more wicked. We have to shine our light even brighter. I think you keep trying. Look, then again, if it's causing a big, what's the word? Rift and ruckus, there are verses that are very clear about that a fool won't listen to you in any way. So you're wasting your time, you're wasting your breath on them. So that's right. Do as much as you can. I love the Didache. Do as much as you can. Sandy, do you want to say something?
Yes, Sandy.
Yeah, there you go. You have to do that sometimes.
We've had, where somebody say to us, but you must just be a good person. But where do you measure it? At what do you measure it? At what's good? What you see is good. Yeah.
I mean, there was Noah. It says he was righteous in his generation. He didn't have much competition, And the other thing is, anybody in this world can be righteous. They can be good. The Father doesn't call us to righteousness, He called us to holiness.
Yeah, but he was righteous in God's eyes.
What, Noah? No, it just says he was blameless in his generation.
Yeah, but remember, it comes from Torah, so it was from someone's point of view.
Yeah, is it one of the New Testament books talks about Noah, that he's a great tzaddik. So Judaism's got this midrash about the idea that Noah wasn't very righteous because he was righteous in his generation. Because some rabbi made that interpretation back then, and that's his interpretation, there's nothing wrong with it. But one of our apostles, I think it was Jude maybe, I'm not sure, talks about Noah, calling Noah a tzaddik.
Because the other part of the midrash also says that he if he was righteous in that wicked generation, how much more so would he have not have been righteous today?
Yeah, exactly. So.
Yeah.
But I'm just thinking about what you said this morning about animals. And when you talked about Noah, I thought to myself, imagine those animals on the ark could speak.
Oh, that would spoil the cruise.
But they can't speak. You've got to just learn to speak their language.
I saw a
What does wolf mean?
It depends on which wolf you're in. You've got different wolves. You've got
yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
and wolf.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on here. Get on my space.
Yeah.
You know, when we were in the Kruger this week, at one stage we stopped at Lower Sabi and had a coffee there at the Mug and Bean, and Judah started playing with the people sitting next to us as a little child, and that mother came and spoke to us and told us her whole life story, that she and her husband actually work in China, but they came back here for holiday, and now the kids here. And the kid's still small, so the kids still say Gugu Gaga, stuff like that. So I had to ask the mother, now, is the child speaking baby talk or Chinese? Do you know the difference? When children say these things, you know, with Morty, when he says da da do, I know exactly what he means, but you guys don't have a clue what he means. Eh?
Yeah.
It's interesting, actually. All right. Anyway, so this mission over here basically telling us to beware of false teachers that'll take you away from the teachings of the apostles.
I think that's your line.
Yeah.
It takes you away from what is being taught in
Yeah.
But
it's a very fine line to figure out nowadays. Eh? It's very grey, actually. I mean, look at the internet. Yeah. There are so many false teachers on YouTube and on the internet nowadays, and fooling millions of people. Yeah. Unsubscribe.
And you know, for a long time you could have almost said, okay, well, at least if they have some certain things in line, like they're supportive of Israel, and they are, or especially on that point, they're very much supportive of Israel, and then you say, okay, well, you know, there must be some merit to it, and they talk about staying community and at least doing it. But I've seen how communities are very much supportive of Israel, but
yeah. Remember, these false teachers know how to use smooth words. They know the action words they need to use to get your attention and trick you into following them.
Actually, yeah, well, I guess a true teacher won't be afraid of saying something that he knows might cause some of the sheep to leave.
Yeah, so there's a famous saying in Judaism that if a rabbi has never been tuned by his community, he's not worth his salt. A rabbi that's loved by everyone, there's a scallon or something, a snake in the grass there. Because he's never been able to reprove someone that's done something wrong. So if you don't like your rabbi, it's good. It's a good rabbi then.
Same with teachers.
Same with teachers. Same thing, yeah.
So if you don't like it, you know you do something right.
Exactly, yeah. If your child comes home with stories about the teachers, and you know, the teachers are giving them good discipline, 100%.
Go for husbands too.
Our what's the word? Marriage counseling services are next week, not this week. All right, so beware of the false teachers. There's something else I wanted to say, but it's okay. It's gone out of my mind.
Sorry.
No worries. All right, if you can bear the whole yoke of the Lord, verse 2. The Didache did not view its instructions as an end unto itself. The verse alludes to a broader spectrum of teaching that needed to be studied and observed. That of the Hebrew scriptures and the teachings of Yeshua that had been transmitted through the apostles. The yoke of the Lord that it talks about here could refer specifically to the Torah. Supporting this is the fact that of the 5 times the word yoke is used in the New Testament, there's the word zugos, interesting. 4 of these refer to the actual Torah itself. Furthermore, in rabbinic literature, the term yoke, or the word oil, is synonymous with the Torah. For example, whoever takes upon himself the yoke of the Torah, they remove from them the yoke of the government and the yoke of worldly concerns. So, however, there's others that interpret the use of the word Lord here as referring to Yeshua. They point to the Master's words where he says, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." In this light, the yoke of the Lord is the yoke of Yeshua, referring to discipleship. So is it referring to Torah or is it referring to discipleship? Both have merit. There shouldn't be a difference between them.
Okay, someone said something very cool. It says if someone keeps Torah and that observation looks very burdensome, or if you keep Torah in it and you find it to be incredibly burdensome, then you're not probably keeping the right Torah.
Yeah.
You're not keeping Hashem's
100%.
Torah.
You know, when they asked Yeshua, what is the greatest commandment of the Torah? Which is a question they used to ask to every rabbi in his day and age to find out what their answer was. He said one of them is, obviously, love the Lord your God. And then he quoted the Shema. And the Shema, the thing about the Shema is on a daily basis when we say the Shema, the whole point, your focus, your kavanah when you say the Shema is, I am accepting the yoke of the Lord. I'm accepting the yoke of heaven upon myself on a daily basis. To put in that yoke on. That's why we've got those two large letters in the Siddur with the Shema. The ayin and the dalet are bigger because it spells the word aid, which is witness. So every day when we say the Shema, there's a witness looking at us saying, we accept the yoke of the Lord upon ourselves. And Yeshua said that's the greatest
I wonder how
commandment.
many angels stand here in the school when you pray.
That's a good question. Well, if there's an angel for every single blade of grass,
Sure.
I wonder about your hair.
Might be very crowded.
Yeah. There's the other story, but then again, there's the other story in this, maybe here, yeah. There's the other story in the Talmud that talks about the demons. I think we studied it maybe last year when we did Torah Club, that beginning of wisdom one. I don't know if we studied it then or not, but anyway, it's in the Talmud that says that if we were able to see demons, we would be shocked. We would actually die from being so scared. It says that's the reason why your clothes wear out, because there's so many demons they're rubbing up against your clothes.
Wow.
So let's please not see the demons. Ignorance is bliss. En as ek my klere so uit rafel.
Klere gaan check vanaand.
Alright, Didache 6 verse 2. You will be complete, but if you cannot keep the entire yoke, then do what you can. Now, Gentile disciples are instructed that the whole yoke of the Lord is the goal for which they should attain. But the Didache acknowledges that not every person will be in position to accomplish this. Fluser aptly points out that an observant Jew does not have a choice mentioned here. He made a covenant. He has to keep the laws of the Torah or else. We made a covenant with God and said, if we break this, then you can punish us and the curse will come upon us. We don't have the choice. But for the Gentile coming in here, they actually have a choice here. Right? If you cannot do it all, then do what you can.
Will that covenant ever be extended to the Gentiles as well?
You've been grafted in, but
Because it almost sounds like we've got like a get out of jail free card.
it does sound that way, yeah.
But it's also, for me, when I think about it, is that when you grow up in that, it's a way of life. You don't really have anything else to compare it, so it's easy. That's how it is. You just walk in it.
But the more assimilated society becomes,
Yeah, in terms of prayers, in terms
Yeah,
of
yeah.
traditions, it's just there. It's just we do it. That's what we do.
yeah.
Whereas when you're coming in from the outside, and you have to learn these things.
Yeah, I can
It takes
imagine,
a
yeah.
lot more effort.
It's the funniest thing this week in the Kruger when there was more Jews than Roy Bokker.
Did you pray every day with them, by the way?
Huh?
Did you pray with them every day?
No, not with them. No. We were staying in our own place. It's the funniest thing when you stop and you talk. We can talk the same language, but if someone who's not Jewish comes in here and listens to this conversation, they won't understand half of the words we use here. Schlepping around and all these things. It's a weird thing.
Just forgotten what I wanted to say.
Oh, welcome to the party. It's a sad thing. Wasn't there a Perkei Avot Mishnah that says he who forgets what he's learned is doomed for Gehenna or something? Remember that one?
I'll meet you there.
Yeah. And the fact that I can't remember the quote perfectly is troublesome. All right, the Didache teaches that those who can handle the whole yoke of the Lord will be complete. The word there is a word we might be familiar with, telios, complete. Right, remember people
The word that they use for Jacob.
Yeah. Ishtam, right? Also the word that Yeshua uses about the Torah not being done away with, right? He came to fulfill the Torah, that whole thing, I think it's there as well. The Greek word telios corresponds to the Hebrew word tamim, unblemished or perfect. Noah was called tamim, Jacob was called tamim. The Master ends the first discourse in the Sermon on the Mount with an injunction saying, you therefore must be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. That sounds impossible. Ne? The Didache points the Gentile believer in the direction of fuller observance of the Torah in light of the teachings of the Master and the Apostles. But at the same time, it leaves room for those to whom this would be unbearable and too difficult in their current situation. And I think all of you guys might have situations like this. If your spouse is not practicing the same religion as you, how do you keep a kosher home? How do you keep Shabbat properly if you're still living with someone else? The Didache says it's not the end of the world.
Okay.
I know that when we started out this whole movement, there were people that ended up saying, no, I've got to divorce my spouse because I can't do Shabbat in my home anymore. And there was a lot of friction because of lots of people. People that, we can remember people like this that had issues like that. Eh? The Didache, if only they knew the Didache back then, said, do as much as you can. It's not the end of the world if you can't keep the Shabbat perfectly, keep a completely kosher home, only speak Hebrew, all these things. Be so kosher that you have a separate toilet for meat and milk. Just chill.
Yo.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
I've just remembered something regarding, Gentiles. And, if you think about it, Yeshua said that if you give a prophet a glass of water because he's a prophet, paraphrasing here, you get a prophet's reward. Now, if you think about the biblical prophets, they suffered a lot.
Mm.
Jeremiah couldn't get married. He was thrown into a well.
Was
Which
he out?
prophet?
Was here to marry?
Yes, and yet,
Yeah.
Yeah, the opposite.
yes. And not to mention Moshe, and all the lying and so on like this. The thing is that for that prophetic calling, for which there is a reward, right? They have to endure a lot because they're the mouthpiece of God.
Mm.
But you can get a prophet's reward by giving you a glass of water.
Wow.
That doesn't sound fair.
No, yeah.
Right? Now, in the same way, the Jewish people are a light to the nations. And they have this covenant with God with 613 laws and so on like this. But in a sense, the Gentiles are invited in as well. But like the prophets, you can give a glass of water and you get the reward.
Mm.
So this is why you can do as much as you can.
Oh.
Whereas the other one really has to, they can't, if you're a prophet and God tells you you shouldn't get married and you should declare that people should go into servitude in Babylon, right? That's what you have to do. You have to do it, right? With all the consequences that come with it. Here you're being invited in.
That's a fantastic analogy, John. You should trademark that. I've never heard that. That's genius. Well done. We should give it a name. The Didache John.
That is Jochen 5 verse.
Jochen 5. Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Yeah, good. I know it does confuse people. This idea of that the Jews must do something and the Gentiles don't have to do it. I think very often it's more of a jealousy that causes the anger around it. There's nothing to be angry about.
And yet also has
It's a good deal, right?
It's a very, very good way of putting it as well. It says if you've got a father who adopts, well, he's got a natural born son to him, and then he adopts a new son.
Yeah.
The requirements from that natural born son will always be, or his expectation, they said, this is my flesh and blood. You need to uphold, you need to carry my name forward. The expectation on him is much greater than the expectation of this newly adopted.
That's a way of, yeah. So yeah, interesting. Thanks, John. The master ends the first discourse of the Sermon on the Mount with the injunction to be perfect as your Father is perfect. We read that already. All right. Some of the things that are discussed here in the way of life section are too difficult for everyone, and that's okay. Right? We've got this thing called divine invitation. Right? It's not actually a salvation issue. Don't get angry. It's not a salvation issue. It's nothing to do with that. I think that's where the confusion comes in very often. All right. Didache 6 verse 3. Concerning food, bear what you can. Beware. We're going to change your menu. The Didache encouraged them to take on more than the bare minimum. The apostolic decree was given as a starting point, not as a maximum. Because it didn't spell out all the details of kashrut over there. This might suggest that it was already obvious to the apostolic community that Gentiles should eat only kosher animals. At the very least, the council seemed to push them in this direction. So, we've got to set the scene here, right? You've come out of idolatry. You've come out of a culture where everything is pork. Now you're coming into our faith. And we're saying to you, here's these 4 rules. We're not saying, you can still have your pork every now and then. We're saying, get with the program. Because we can't eat together, guys. The whole point of being in a community is having shared meals. In fact, later in the Didache, when they learn about the fact that certain types of people, you're not even allowed to share food with them. So if you want to come join us at our table, you first have to learn all these catechisms that we have to teach you. And included in that is kosher food, because there's no way we're going to be able to intermingle Jew and Gentile if there is no level of kashrut where we can meet each other. And there's the whole story with old Paul and Peter, where Peter went and joined the Jews, and Paul said, hey, what's going on here? He chastised him. So they were expecting the community of the Gentiles to come into some form of keeping kashrut so that we can be together. To leave it separate, sure, we can argue that legally speaking, halachically speaking, technically, there's no sin, whatever, if you're doing that, but practically, it's a problem. for our communities. So they were expecting people to do more than the bare minimum. And that is, I guess, people say biblically kosher animals. That's a horrible statement because biblically kosher is kosher, kashrut as we have it today, with all its halachic implications. That is biblically kosher. So what we call kosher animals, it's a confusing phrase to use. The rabbis themselves had in mind that many Gentiles would one day take on aspects of the Jewish dietary laws. This is what the Midrash Rabbah and Ecclesiastes Rabbah says. In the future, the blessed Holy One will send a herald to announce, let anyone who has never eaten the flesh of pig in his life come and receive his reward. Many people from the nations, Gentiles of the world, who have never eaten the flesh of a pig in their lives will come and receive their reward. So even in Jewish tradition, we saw this happening in the future.
Where is that from?
Ecclesiastes Rabbah 1 verse 28 in the Midrash. Yeah. Now, I don't know what that means for you guys. I'm pretty sure all of us in our past have eaten delicious flesh of the pig.
When we come to on that point of
Speck and a yes.
realization, when we came,
Yes,
died to that old and got
there will
born.
be a reward for there will be a reward for not having this morning bacon and eggs. There you go.
And it is so weird that when you said, you come from a society where it's just all pig, were you meaning that time or you mean now?
I guess now as well.
Because now it's even the same.
Yeah, all your boerewors has got pig in it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like
All the casings.
It's almost a sign of just how that is such an important aspect. Or to me, it's an evidence of that the Bible is true.
Yeah.
Because if you look at just how drastically the world is trying to, or how they've indulged into something that is, or that the Bible frowns upon and says, no, this is not food for you, then the world's just like, no, we will.
Yeah.
And I mean,
Don't get me started on
tremendous
other products.
delicacy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, let's carry on reading it. Nevertheless, the Didache could only encourage Gentiles in the direction of accepting dietary laws that went beyond the minimum of the apostolic decree. A plethora of issues would have made the higher standards of Jewish law difficult, if not impossible, for many Gentile believers to observe. For example, many believers lived in the same home and ate in the same table with non-believing family members. Many were slaves. You can't afford kosher meat. Have you seen the price? Many lived far outside of Jewish communities. Where are they going to get kosher meat from? Non-Jewish disciples of the Master were to make their best effort at the Torah's dietary laws, and they were not to be condemned for a failure to meet the whole burden of obligation. So don't go home and shout at the rest of your family members who eat a nice pig with an apple in its mouth for Christmas. You can't condemn them. That's just not the right way. You're encouraged to do as much as you can, but don't condemn anyone for doing it. Don't condemn yourself if you can't do it neither. Is there an option for you? Yes, there is an option. Go vegan. Vegetarian.
Yes.
You won't be the first person to do it.
By the way,
Daniel did it.
vegetarians live longer than meat eaters.
No, who wants to live longer?
I agree.
Okay, the longer you live, the longer you can be a light, okay?
No, the longer you live as a vegetarian, the more depressing it is. Why do you want to live a life like that? I'd rather jump off a bridge. The apostolic constitutions renders this with a prohibition on blood as well. It adds blood to this dietary laws as well, connecting them as well. All right, verse 3 continues to say, but scrupulously guard yourself from what has been offered to idols, because it is the worship of dead gods. Even if one is not able to keep all the laws of kashrut, he must absolutely avoid idolatrous food. Completely avoid idolatrous food. The prohibition of food sacrificed to idols was one of the 4 bestowed upon the Gentiles in the Jerusalem Council. It was so important that it merits an almost 3-chapter discussion in Paul's first epistle to the Corinthians. Paul states emphatically, you cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. You cannot partake of the table of the Lord and the table of demons. The prohibition is brought up twice in the book of Revelation, where it's always linked with sexual immorality, just like it is in Acts chapter 15. Very interesting. We find it again in the universal Sibylline oracles as well. It says, eat no blood and abstain from things offered to idols. That's pretty interesting. So that's it. That's a short chapter for us. And that was chapter 6.
In today's life, can you think of examples of food offered to idols? Do we still have that? Is there a...
Yes, in Eastern countries. Not here by us. I wouldn't think here by us, yeah.
The little place on the
Yeah, we can actually offer fruits and stuff. And I don't think here in South Africa you'll find it.
Maybe,
So here's one thing that people always say. They think halal food is offered to idols.
I was
It's
just
not.
about to-
It's not offered to idols.
Just to read, 'cause
Halal food, there's nothing wrong with them doing a prayer to Allah, who's just a different name for Hashem. That's not offered to idols. You don't have to you don't have to burn something that's got a halal sticker on it neither. Most of our kosher stuff has halal stickers as well. It's not idolatry. Don't worry about that.
But shouldn't one try and avoid the halal?
Why?
And I'm
Oh, don't
asking-
like the sign.
I'm asking because
That's a personal problem. There's nothing wrong with the sign.
guy that in the little shopping centre there by us, it's halal and everything, and to walk past that and smell that curry, that is safe for me because I felt I couldn't have it.
What? You can have it. You can have your cake and eat
Do
it.
what you can, Sandy.
Do what you can. Just don't drag.
Is it wrong or should one avoid it?
So,
If it-
as a disciple, the Didache is saying you should try and have only kosher meat. Halal meat's not kosher meat. If you can.
Well, you can have
But-
kosher
but
meat
that
that is. Well, okay, no, meat is another. I'm thinking of
But
other
that is
products.
slaughter very similar.
I think so, yeah. I'm not sure. But I think so. Shouldn't
Well,
be.
they won't be picking it.
And I realise that, but I mean, isn't their food, I mean, if you look at the way that the ordinary food is being slaughtered, compared to how they slaughter it.
It's different, yeah. So there must be something closer, more cleaner as well. But the thing is, So for you, it's that question of how much are you able to do. For a Jew, of course, he could never eat halal food that isn't kosher. But Muslims can eat kosher food because kosher food is also halal. But we can't eat their food because it hasn't been slaughtered according to the halachic principles that we follow. Yeah, so halal is not an issue. One place where idolatrous food might come into play is if you go to a local African, like a circumcision ceremony and stuff. I don't know if they still offer up food to ancestors and stuff like that before they slaughter the cow or whatever. That might be an issue, yeah. That's where I can think of in South Africa, it might be a thing.
Yes,
Unless you can point to some material, can you say, you mentioned now the malachic way of slaughtering. Do you have a...
Yeah, we've got a book in the bookshop called Biblically Kosher. It discusses everything kosher. From that to what is biblically kosher, to animals, to slaughter, to milk and meat, all of those things, yeah.
Yeah, it'd be nice just when it does come up. Because usually, you see, when it usually comes to this, because when people ask me, usually I do then try to stick to more vegetarian. And I just tell them, guys, this is the yogurt I want that I've taken on.
Yeah, there's different levels of kashrut as well.
I encourage you to explore the same, but it's not just because I do it.
Yeah. So there's different levels of kashrut as well, eh? There's the Beit Din wants to give us the minimum level of what's kosher, but then you get something called glut kosher, which is like a higher level of kosher. The reason why it's called glut is because they actually check the lungs of the cow to make sure if it's chalat or not, if it's smooth or if it's bumpy. If it's bumpy, the animal's got a sickness, and therefore the animal's actually not fully kosher according to that level. So in South Africa, all kosher meat is glut kosher. That's our level. Our level is up there. Plain kosher in South Africa is that level. And other countries, you can choose the different levels like that. But some people will eat vegetarian at a restaurant that isn't kosher. Other people will say you can't even eat off those dishes because it's not, the dishes are mixed between milk and meat, etc., etc. So there's different levels of kashrut and how everyone keeps it. So I realized that, when me and Rebecca got married, we went full kosher. And we could never have a meal with anyone. It was horrible. So we decided it's not working. My community is a mixed community, so we lowered our level, so we'll still eat at people's houses and stuff. We'll just bring our own meat. We won't eat meat outside of our house, basically. But we'll eat vegetarian.
We need to find some pizza place to say, hey,
Any pizza,
I'll bring my meat to you and you just make me the pizza.
But the problem is they can't add the cheese on there.
Yeah.
Yes,
So what's the point of...
I guess, yeah.
So yeah.
Some egg pizza.
But the other